no safety first this week. Instead, we're going to give you a full 40-plus minutes of Brian Germain. We're just going to
Can you handle it?
We're going to completely saturate you, soak you in Brian Germain. We're going to go to that right now. Hey, Brian, welcome back to Skydive Radio.
Hey, Dave. I'm always pleased to be here.
This is but we haven't had you for a feature segment for a long, long time.
I know, too long. All these little short snippets. I like going long. You know me.
That's what she said. So today, we want to kind of expand on the conversation that we had with Jay Stokes on the last episode and talk in more detail about some of the Canopy collisions that we've been seeing again. I think you had a chance to listen to that interview. Is that true?
I did, yeah. That was really, I thought there was a lot of good things there. There was some political discussion for sure, and that's inevitable, that the people are going to want to, look in terms of regulation. But I don't feel that that's the answer. And Jay seemed to be kind of heading that direction too. Let's educate, let's teach people, and let's talk about all the specific things that lead to it. But let's face it, there's things that haven't happened lately that can happen again if we remain kind of where we are. So there's an awful lot to talk about on this topic.
Well, I think kind of to get us started, I did put a Facebook post out on this, and we got several replies back from it. So I want to kind of just jump into some of these questions, and then maybe that can kind of lead into this conversation a little bit.
Perfect.
Mike Boyson, he's asking about hook knives. He wants to know, do they still serve a purpose for regular fun jumpers, or are they just for CRW? What do you think about that as it relates to these recent incidents?
Well, I don't know that they would have made a difference in these incidents. Obviously, having one, it's a great idea. Why jump without one when it doesn't take up any space? It doesn't affect your life until you need it when you've got a line over on your reserve or you're in some sort of a funky wrap. But you'll be bummed out if you're found wanting. If you go scrambling for a hook knife that isn't there. So why not, right? But I'm not so sure that is really a pivotal issue related to our problem right now.
These incidents that we're talking about now all happened fairly close to the ground. There probably wasn't a lot of time to do much of anything. Is that true?
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's much more about keeping your eyes open and your mind open to new possibilities, unconsidered possibilities. Target fixation is something that we talk about in accuracy. We talk about it with students where they get fixated on trying to hit a target and they get tunnel vision. And I think that is a big part of the problem, and it's not just for beginners. It's for swoopers as well. It's for people coming down from 100-way. When you get fixated on your little reality and what your eyes happen to be looking at the time, and you start forgetting, or you get into this mindset where you're limited and you're not taking in data from behind your head. Looking all around for where are they going to kind of come and try to get me. I think that's really closer to the heart of the problem, just not being aware.
So the next question from Jason Garcia is one that I think applies pretty well. He says, why is it that a 100-person formation can land safely and not a single plane load?
Well, that's a good question.
We talked a little bit with Jay in that interview about the difference between Cessna drop zones and turbine drop zones, but a couple of these incidents happened at turbine drop zones, but with only a couple canopies in the airspace at the time.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that it is cool that we can put so many people out of the plane on a big way and people fly a beautiful pattern. I think that's really what it comes down to, is that it's predictable. When you're on a big way, if you do something wrong under canopy, something profoundly different from what everybody else is doing, there's consequences. You get grounded. And, in many cases, you spent a lot of money to be there. So people tend to fly in a predictable way. And the more we can do that, the more people kind of expect us to be at a certain place at a certain altitude, and it reduces our stress level. And the lower the stress level, I find the more our awareness expands. So it's kind of ironic that in a chaotic situation where people aren't flying a pattern, because of the stress level, they're breathing badly, their brains are not functioning as well as they could, their awareness shrinks. And so we have the problem is compounding itself.
So in some of these bigger groups, they have very specific planned break-off procedures, very specific separate landing areas sometimes, or at least separate the landing area into different sections.
Yep.
We don't necessarily get that when we just jump on load 4 on a random Saturday.
Yeah.
What can we be doing to kind of promote that awareness on just a normal load?
Well, I mean, I find anytime I'm skydiving, regardless of the size of the aircraft, if I can get to the loading area early and talk to people, just, what are you up to? What are you doing? You're doing a big way. You're doing a tracking dive. You're pulling low. You're pulling high, right? You're doing a swoop. You're going left-hand pattern, right-hand 270 or whatever. If we can have some state of expectation about what's going on around us, it doesn't always play out that way, but at least there's a pretty good chance that we know what to expect. So I think that's step one. The other thing is to segregate landing areas, and of course we can separate by time and distance. It doesn't take that much distance, particularly if you have an established swoop lane, whether it's on the pond or a couple of wind blades set up, even cones. This is where the swoopers are going to be, and then we have a fast lane and a slow lane, like on the highway. And that doesn't certainly prevent all accidents on the highway. We see plenty of that. But it certainly controls the circumstances a little bit, where you have some state of expectation. If you're driving 45 miles an hour in the left lane, you can expect to either have a horn from behind you or a serious problem. But I mean, to take that road metaphor even further, it's not even a metaphor; it's an example. If you drive, I mean, I live in D.C. right now, right? And you drive down the road, and people are clueless. Most of them are texting and adjusting their radio. They're getting their XM frequency right while they talk on their other cell phone, and they're reaching around and telling the kids to be quiet. So we have the same kind of thing going on where people kind of get lazy and well, I'm just driving a car, I don't have to pay attention. I'm just flying my Canopy. The jump's over. I already pulled. And I think that is the root of the problem. And we're seeing it, that same philosophy that the skydive is over when your pilot chute comes out and you get a canopy over your head. People relax a little too much. And that kind of gets them, and when I say relax, they stop worrying. But the truth is that I don't know that their heart rate comes down sufficiently. Some of them take the time. The great canopy pilots of the world take time after opening to take a deep breath and look around and say, all right, reset. We're beginning a new chapter of this event. Let's take a deep breath and calm down and look around, up and down and to the sides. Where are all the chess pieces? Where are all those other canopies? Big canopy below me, I'm going to see him again. Little canopy above me, I'm going to see him again. So kind of creating some predictability based on the initial frame after deployment, and that will continue to evolve. I mean, sometimes the huge canopy will spiral and surprise you, right? So, yeah, there's a long list of things that people like us do, people that sort of, either live on the drop zone or have lived on the drop zone or are in this environment. We get into habits that keep us safe. And we're fending off the attacks, the inadvertent attacks, from the people that maybe aren't taking it so seriously, that haven't seen so many fatalities. And so I think we have to raise the level of awareness for everybody that when you pull, now it's getting serious. Now we're into the chapter of the jump, the 4 or 5 minutes where most of the accidents happen.
So do you think that that there's a certain level of complacency that's adding to it, or at least with the higher experienced jumpers that we're seeing have these issues?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I mean, if nothing's happened lately under canopy, then you tend to relax and go, oh, okay, everything's fine. I can just kind of go into my focus mode, and we get so fixated on making our cool landing or fixated on hitting the target that we forget that there's other people in the air, other people that might be unpredictable. So not to say that we should remain scared, because I don't find fear is the answer at all. It never was. But if the fear raises our awareness, raises our level of, scanning the horizon and considering the possibility of aborting and looking for where the danger's coming from, we're far more likely to avoid it.
So why don't you take us through just your whole thought process on a skydive at an average, let's say an otter drop zone on a Saturday? You get open, you're on a load that maybe had a couple tandems, a couple RW groups, a few free fly groups, and maybe some wingsuiters, just a standard load. And you're out somewhere in the middle of all that mix under Canopy. What sort of is your thought process from opening until walking off of the landing area?
You're right. Well, of course, my process always begins in the loading area, and I kind of make sure that the exit orders are appropriate. And I think that discussion's been milked to its fullest extent on Skydive Radio. But you get the flat groups out first, and then the free flyers, and then the students, and then the tandems. Or reversing the last two is sometimes an option, but that part is very, very, very important. But then also you got to say, all right, who's landing when, and where are they landing?
Can I pause just for a second? Because while I'm thinking about it, one of the things that came up in that interview with Jay on the last episode was he mentioned that there's a couple drop zones out there that are putting the free flyers out ahead of the belly flyers. And I thought we had this figured out. He didn't say specifically what drop zones these were, but like immediately that sent red flags up to me. I would like you to comment on that a little bit. And is there ever a situation that you feel that's okay to do? I mean, maybe if there's absolutely no wind aloft and no wind at canopy altitude, but how often does that happen, and is that a good practice?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you have a crosswind jump run when it's windy, that can separate people horizontally more. But in general, the issue of deployment airspace is, to me, the most important part. We can create airspace once we're open. We have the capability to go to brakes and reduce our descent rate by more than half, or spiral and get down in a hurry, even on the larger canopies if you want to get below somebody, a couple of turns and you're below them. So I feel like the real issue is about prop blast penetration. So in other words, a free flyer stays under the airplane longer because they have less drag. Their body is at a lower angle of attack. And so because of that, they project further across the ground after exit. And so their elevator shaft, if you will, takes this longer arc and takes longer to actually reach terminal. And to go to the straight down mode, whereas the flatties have a tendency to sort of drift towards the tail more. And because of that difference in arc, in your trajectory after exit, it's very, very important that we put the free flyers out after the belly flyers, simply because they will stay under the airplane so long, right? So if you put the free flyers out first, you wait 10 seconds, they may still be relatively close to the aircraft. Because they are pointed into the wind, into the relative wind. So I think that it doesn't make any sense to me, even though the free flyers may get down there sooner. What good is getting somebody down there sooner if they're going to open directly underneath you?
I think right? I think the argument that was being made for it was that, and I don't know if I agree with this either, but the argument being that the free flyers are the ones that tend to jump the more highly loaded canopies, and so getting them open sooner gets those smaller canopies down first. But I really don't know that I buy that either.
I don't think that the difference is great enough to warrant that. It's valid that on the whole, the free flyers tend to jump smaller parachutes. But that's not always the case. But if we don't have our separation for deployment, what good is the rest of it?
Yeah.
We can create separation afterwards. I can get from my deployment altitude of 3,500 feet down to 2 in seconds if I want to. So, if I have the clear airspace, I really don't have to worry. If I don't have a person-shaped hole in my parachute, I can maneuver it in such a manner that gets me away from everybody.
Yeah, I know Carrie specifically mentioned to me, well, that doesn't make sense because I'm a free flyer, and oftentimes I'm in the first or second group out, and yet the video guys shooting the tandems are landing at the same time I am. So,
yeah, it's true. There's tremendous variability, and I think that if we create some predictable, reasonable precautions leading into the skydive, from there it's the canopy collisions, really, if we're trying to avoid it, it seems to me it's much more about awareness.